Okay, this is the first video in our genetics chapter, and what I have here is the sheet that students that you had, and you wrote out the definitions for your vocabulary words on this sheet. So this has already been filled out. And up here we have the code for the traits for our ice cream snowmen. So a couple of variations, maybe you received this and you don't have these definitions written in, you can go ahead and write those in. The other thing you might have gotten is a non-color coded sheet. So if that's the case, hit the pause button and go ahead and write the letters on these boxes and color them in. Okay, so hopefully everybody is caught up at this point. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to talk about these genetic terms: gene, allele, trait, homozygous, heterozygous, dominant, and recessive, because these are terms that we're going to use throughout the next chapter or two extensively. Now, we learned in the last chapter that we have chromosomes, that eukaryotic organisms have their genetic material on chromosomes. Humans have 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs, and that can get to be a little bit hard to handle. That's a lot of genetic material. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at ice cream snowmen. And these ice cream snowmen only have 6 traits. They have a flavor of chocolate for their bottom snowball and a flavor of vanilla for their top snowball. The hair is either going to be sprinkle or whipped cream. Their eyes are going to be chocolate chip or butterscotch. And what we're going to see then when we do the sex chromosome is that they have pretzel or licorice arms, and they can have a disease called melting disease. So because they only have 6 traits, we're going to use their chromosomes to study these terms and to look at some of the ways that we handle genetics. So to start off with, we just said these are chromosomes. So we're going to label these as chromosome 1, chromosome 1, and chromosome 2. Remember, we talked about the fact that a lot of organisms have their chromosomes in homologous pairs. So we looked at these back in the chapter on meiosis and mitosis, and we said a homologous pair are 2 chromosomes that are similar but not identical. So you can see here, if we look at the bands, these are going to represent, we're going to talk about the fact that these are genes. We have a dark brown and a light brown. Is that similar? Yes. Is that identical? No. Here we have a capital C and a lowercase c. Again, similar, but not identical. A dark orange, light orange with a capital E and a lowercase e. And here we have 2 lowercase h's. These 2 are identical. So overall, this chromosome and this chromosome are similar, but they're not identical. So let's start off. I apologize, these the font's a little blurry here, but we'll talk about these. So let's start off with the first definition. I'm going to jump down to number 3, a trait, and that's a physical characteristic. So over here, some of our traits are, and what I'll do is I'm going to color code. So if we talk about something here, I'm going to underline it here. So a trait would be sprinkle hair, or actually let's do hair, eyes, top snowball, bottom snowball. Those are my traits. And we're going to see that there's possible options for that. A trait is created from a gene. So we have a gene is a segment of a chromosome that carries the code for a trait. So if we look at this is the gene for the bottom snowball. Gene for the bottom snowball. This is the gene for hair. And your chromosomes have genes like this, but they might be for things like your eye color, your hair color. You have hair color as well, but also for diseases, for the way that your body puts together proteins. And so again, our chromosomes and our genes are much more complicated. Now, if you notice, we have different forms of a gene. So an allele is the different forms of a gene. And here are our alleles. So we've got regular chocolate or dark chocolate. You've got regular vanilla or French vanilla. You've got sprinkle hair or whipped cream hair, chocolate chip, or butterscotch chip. So what I'm doing is, as we talk about something like, for example, the traits, I outlined it in blue, the genes, the alleles are in green, and so I outlined those in green. This should have been green. Sorry about that. And what we see is that depending on the combination of genes that we have, we will get either one or the other traits. Now, we're going to see later this can be a little bit more complicated than what we're talking about here, but you always start off with the simplest form. So what about those, which one shows up? Well, now we're talking about dominant or recessive. So dominant is an allele whose trait always shows up in the organism when the allele is present, and recessive is an allele that is masked when a dominant allele is present. So what we do with the dominant is we'll represent it with an uppercase letter, and we represent the recessive with a lowercase letter. So this is how this would play out. If we look at this snowman's alleles for his bottom snowball, we would have the option of having a regular chocolate or a dark chocolate ice cream. Dark chocolate is the light brown with the lowercase c. Regular chocolate is the darker brown with an uppercase C. And what we would see is, as long as we have one of these, we're going to get regular chocolate. So this is dominant, this is recessive, and this is going to equal regular chocolate. The only way we see the recessive traits is if there's two of them. So for example, let's go down through here. I have a capital V and a lowercase v. This is French vanilla, which is a really creamy vanilla. This is regular vanilla. So this is dominant, this is recessive. We're going to have regular vanilla ice cream in the snowman. Down here, I have a capital E and a lowercase. Capital is chocolate chip, lowercase is butterscotch chip. So this gets masked, this gets hidden. But here, I have two recessives. So for this, we actually get to see that recessive trait of whipped cream hair. Whipped cream hair. And this shows us one of their next definitions. When you have two traits that are the same, so we have homozygous and we have heterozygous. Having two identical traits, alleles for a trait, you're homozygous. Having two different alleles for a trait, you're heterozygous. So if we look at this HH, that's homozygous. Both of the alleles are the same. But if we look at our capital C and lowercase c, those are heterozygous. Those are two different alleles. If we look at our capital E and our lowercase e, those are heterozygous. We have two different alleles for the trait. And you may or may not have heard prior in the year, homo means the same and hetero means different. So that's how you can remember that. There's another option for homozygous. You could have capital H, capital H. So the way we differentiate between these is we call this homozygous recessive and we call this homozygous dominant. So this is homozygous recessive, and this is homozygous dominant. All right, the last thing that we need to talk about is genotype and phenotype, and my definitions got cut off, so I'm just going to kind of scroll this down so we can see my last two definitions. Genotype, we have here written out an organism's genetic makeup or allele combination. Phenotype is the physical traits that appear as a result of the genotype. So phenotype is how, what the traits look like, the appearance. Versus genotype, which is the alleles. So let's do a couple of examples here. The genotype of this snowman, so the genotype is capital C, lowercase c. The appearance, though, is a regular scoop of regular chocolate. The genotype is capital E, lowercase e. But the phenotype, again, this is a recessive and this is a dominant. So this snowman is going to have chocolate chip eyes. So tell me what the genotype and the phenotype is for hair. All right, did you say that the genotype was lowercase h, and that the hair is going to be whipped cream hair? If so, you were correct. All right, so let's just do a recap here. What are we talking about in this video? We're hitting all of these important terms that we're going to use again and again. We started off with a trait, that's something that we see, and we have genes that cause that trait to appear. And we're going to talk in the next video about how does that happen. We're going to review the fact that genes code for proteins here in just a little bit. We have different forms of those genes called alleles. We can have a dominant allele or a recessive allele. A dominant always shows up, the recessive is hidden or masked. Our alleles can be homozygous, where they're the same, or heterozygous, where they're different. And when we look at the genotype, we're looking at the alleles. And when we look at the phenotype, we're looking at the way that the organism appears or looks like. So in the next video, we'll start to look at what happens when we want to find out how offspring are going to turn out. Okay, thanks for watching.